The US trade war can't hold up any longer. Trump is eager to end the trade war. And today, I'll thoroughly examine how the US went from arrogance to complete capitulation. Let's first discuss Trump's calculations. He initially thought the trade war would be a profitable venture. Why? Because he did the math. The US sells $160 billion worth of goods to China each year, while China sells over $500 billion to the US. By his logic, if the trade war leads to a total shutdown of trade, the US would only lose $160 billion and China would lose $500 billion. So the US would definitely come out ahead. But what's the reality? The reality slapped him hard. Why do I say that? Because the $160 billion worth of goods the US exports to China can easily be substituted. For example, if the US doesn't sell soybeans, Brazil and Russia are eager to step in. If the US restricts chips, China can develop its own. And Huawei's Kirin chips are thriving. As a result, what's worse is that the $500 billion worth of goods China sells to the U.S. has no substitutes for the US. For instance, rare earths are crucial for high-tech industries. 80% of global rare earth processing is in China's hands, and the US military and electronics industries would collapse without them. Similarly, for electronic components and machinery, if US factories are cut off, production lines stop immediately. Therefore, Trump's calculations were flawed from the start, and even funnier, China not only didn't collapse under the trade war, but actually became stronger. When the US raised tariffs, China retaliated with equivalent sanctions. When the US restricted high-tech exports, China accelerated its independent R&D. The result? As companies are complaining, farmers are going bankrupt, production costs are skyrocketing. And inflation is skyrocketing too. Trump then realized that the trade war was not what he imagined. China simply doesn't fall for these tactics. Seeing that he couldn't fix goods trade, Trump wanted to escalate to the next level, the service trade war, focusing on the businesses of tech giants like Google, Facebook, and Amazon. The problem is that the US has a surplus in service trade, earning $300 billion annually from digital services, finance, and intellectual property from around the world. If he really engages in a service trade war, the US would lose even more if others stopped buying its services. You saw this coming and made it clear if the US is tough on goods trade, the EU will tax Google, Meta, and Facebook, including digital advertising, cloud computing, and streaming. Upon hearing this, Trump immediately backed down. Why? Because US tech giants are the core support of the US stock market. If their stock prices collapse, Wall Street will explode, and this war can't be fought. What if the US stubbornly escalates? Then it moves to the third level financial war. This level is even tougher because China and Japan hold over $1 trillion in US debt, with China holding $784.3 billion and Japan holding $1.13 trillion, totaling nearly $2 trillion. If a financial war breaks out between the US and China, and both China and Japan dump us debt simultaneously, US debt prices would crash, making it impossible for the US to borrow new debt, and the government could shut down. Japan's finance minister has long hinted that US debt is a negotiating weapon. In April, when US debt prices fell, Trump immediately suspended tariffs on 75 countries. Why? Because he feared that a crash in US debt would end dollar hegemony. So the US dares not touch this financial war layer. So, what else can the US do? The last move is geopolitics, which essentially means causing trouble in others' backyards to create unrest and scare away foreign investments. The US is adept at this. For example, when the euro was just rising in 1999, the US launched the Kosovo War, scaring away European capital, and the euro's exchange rate plummeted by 30% in this trade war. when India and Pakistan suddenly erupted in conflict. Trump quickly said, "I just found out," and Vice President Pence also claimed, "It's not related to the US, but who believes it? There are plenty of terrorist organizations that the US has supported, such as bin Laden, the Taliban, and ISIS, none of whom lacked us influence early on." Moreover, in the 2014 Ukrainian color revolution, the snipers supported by the US shot pro-Western protesters, framing the government, leading to Yanukovych's ouster and Ukraine fully aligning with the West. So, regarding the India-Pakistan conflict, it's clear to anyone that there's an intention to destabilize the region and force China to make concessions. Fortunately, Pakistan quickly counterattacked using Chinese equipment, and India conceded, ending the conflict in 4 days. If it had dragged on longer, foreign investments would have withdrawn, and regional instability would have posed significant troubles for China. Friends, do you see it clearly? Now, the US has lost in goods trade, service trade, and financial warfare, and in its final attempt to play dirty. China countered with one move. This illustrates strength, though we must remain vigilant, as the US will continue to play tricks. As long as we remain steady, victory is in sight. Here's a question for everyone. What do you think the US's next move will be? Will it continue the trade war or resort to other tricks?